All right, everyone. So, as many of you already know, as it was announced yesterday, Force Throw is being suspended from Premiere. September 22nd is the date in which it is no longer allowed, and we've got a lot of things to talk about. We're going to kind of dive into the meta a little bit, but first things first, this is the card that basically every single person was, this is the card that's going to be banned. If there's going to be a ban, this is the card, period. No question. There was another card that was like, oh yeah, we're gonna ban, I don't know, Force Lightning over Force Throw. If Force Lightning goes, then Force Throw is going. It is the number one card that was on everyone's hit list. And there were kind of a split to it. Like, there are a lot of more casual players, so the majority of people were done with Force Throw. It was, kind of locking up some play styles. It's just a little bit unfun, even though there is the competitive crowd that, doesn't want to see Force Throw banned because it can be played around. It does have a little bit of skill measure to it. It was kind of just not a very fun card to play against. And as we look, whether or not you think it should be banned, FFG gives us the reason as to why they are really banning it. As you can see, over half of the top 64 decks of the Galactic Championship continue to have that Force Throw and continue to play those types of decks after the Galactic Championship. As you can see, 35 to 40% of the top 8 meta, or up to 45 to potentially even over 50% of the meta is at any given time Force Throw. So this is the problem. It wasn't about necessarily that the card is too broken, although you could argue that because of the play rate and because of all these other factors, it is just that powerful. But realistically, it was just way too common. It had a kind of disruptive play style, right? Attacking opponent's hand is always something that people less like. And it was an extremely cheap way to kind of just annihilate opponents' leaders. And all these things just made it an irritating card to play against for a lot of people. And of course, a very powerful card that a lot of people tried to fit into their decks. So really, I'm not surprised. They also mentioned that they wanted to do this just before the next set comes out, so that when you have the sector qualifiers and regional championships start, people have some time to play with the meta without Force Throw, so they kind of know what's expected. So with that said, where are we now? Now that Force Throw is banned, where do we go from here? If we pull up the meta of set 5 here, this is where we get to see some major differences. So if we pull up like the top 10, for example, here, and I want to focus in on the, let's see, top 8 here. So these are the winners, and honestly, the winners matter a little bit less to me than the overall top 8, just because it gives a bigger sample size and what we're seeing more consistently. If you look here, there's actually not a whole lot of, dominance from Force Throw. It's just that Force Throw is being really, really played in the top 2. If you expand that a little bit, Boba Fett, Sabine, and Cad Bane are all not running Force Throw, but it's really these top 2 decks that are dominating. It's heroism, aggression that just pair super well. Because one of the things with heroes was that it didn't have really a ton of amazing removal answers comparatively to villainy, and these 2 decks in of themselves are the dominant ones. Quinlan Red is by far the best Force Throw deck, in my opinion. Just the combination of Quinlan plus Tarkin Town, the ability to already deal a little bit of damage. You can kind of force through your opponent with minimal, losses, because even though if your opponent has a cheap card, the extra damage from Quinlan and Tarkin Town can just wipe away units. So you get to attack opponent's hands while dealing damage. You could also force through yourself, but Quinlan, as that tempo disruptive deck, getting benefit from a 1-cost removal event is incredible. The ability to curve out and then still deal with your opponent's units, not only between Quinlan's action and Tarkin Town, but also Force Throw. That was the best deck for Force Throw. So I think Quinlan, out of all of them, is getting the biggest hit. It kind of makes sense. The top deck of the meta, with arguably the best card in the meta, it goes hand in hand. Han Blue does also take a big hit. One of the things with Han is we had Kiani Mundi, which allow you to refill your hand and Force Throw yourself so that you could drop Crate Dragons, Lukes, Anakins in the discard pile and then hit something for 6, 7, 8, whatever it was, which was a nice, powerful play as well. And again, one of the things with these decks is that one cost removal really pushed out some potential other aggressive decks from coming in, or just, people that are trying to stabilize the board with some big units. This Force Throw just dealt with all of that. So Han, Quinlan, definitely number one, number two decks. They're full 3-of Force Throws as per typical. This was the two that really are going to be hit hard. Boba green, Sabine green, Cad Bane red, all don't get affected by this realistically. The Kylo Tarkin Town definitely gets hit by this. I don't think the deck is really reliant on Force Throw nearly as much as a lot of other people think. Migs is kind of Migs. The Witch of the Mist, Force Lightning, Power of the Dark Side, just kind of the overall, theme of Kylo doesn't rely like an insane amount on Force Throw. It's definitely a hit though. Anakin Blue, I think this actually hits Anakin Blue a little bit more than Han Blue. And the reason I say that is one of the best ways for Anakin Blue to kind of compete up against a lot of the decks was that you have this value-oriented game plan in the ground, but you need to actually get that board started. And so dealing with a couple of units, you can actually start getting your attacks in was pretty relevant, or just dealing with catching up on tempo because your leader deploys a little bit later. So I think it hits it a little bit harder than Han, which is a little bit unfortunate. And of course we have Talzin and Yoda. These decks, Yoda specifically, I think still has the game plan, just because yes, you did have Force units, but you also wanted to play things like C-3PO on turn one. Like there was like a lot of other cards that people were playing because of the Rey. So I think it hits Yoda a little bit less. But then Talzin was a deck that absolutely wanted Force Throw, and absolutely is going to get hit hard by it. It's a deck that honestly has never really been super high on my list, but obviously the winner of the Galactic Championship definitely made a splash. I do think Talzin Red got significantly worse. Honestly, between Quinlan and Han and Anakin and Kylo and Talzin, I think Talzin and Quinlan are the two decks that are going to be feeling this the most. After that, it kind of goes down, and you get to talk about all the other decks like Double Red. Kylo obviously is going to miss it. Maul Blue, like basically any Force deck that had aggression is going to miss it. But I do think Quinlan Red and Han Blue are going to feel it. Quinlan Red specifically is going to feel a lot more. Does that mean Quinlan's not going to be the best deck or not a top 5 deck? I don't think so. Quinlan still has a lot of powerful things going for it. And I think Han Blue also has a lot of powerful things going for it. So will the meta shift? I mean, Boba Data Vault might be the most commonly played card, but I think what's more interesting about this is not which of these like top 10 lists is going to be better than the other one after the Force Throw ban, because honestly, I think a lot of these are still going to be competing. To me, the more interesting one is what decks haven't we been seeing because Force Throw has been super common. Now, this may not even be anything, but cards or decks like the more aggressive types, like for example, Kazuda Tarkin Town. One of the most annoying ways that Kazuda had to deal with was Force Throw, because if you get a pilot onto a aggression or a vehicle in space, it is incredibly hard to deal with. Take, for example, Quinlan. If you're fighting Quinlan, you're playing Kazuda Tarkin Town, and you just get down, like, let's say they deal with your turn 1 unit. Great. Turn 2, you play a unit, you get Kazuda on it in turn 3. That's going to be a unit that your opponent has to kind of deal with, and it will be able to race your Quinlans out there, especially with Tarkin Town. Like, you're going to be able to pump in tons of damage. That was a risky play, because Quinlan could just throw a Depa Billaba on your Millennium Falcon or whatever it is you have, and you're kind of screwed. So that type of strategy, where we have these more aggressive decks that are really reliant on, some big plays and not getting absolutely dominated in the early game by just a Force Throw or two, is where I think we're going to see the biggest splash. I don't think it's going to be like, oh yeah, now it's completely going to be dominated by Boba Data Vault. Like, this is the number 1 deck by far. It's not even close type of deal. Although I do think Boba Data Vault did get a lot better because of this. It's just the other cards that we're not seeing because of Force Throw is where I'm curious as to where the meta is going to go. And I think that's where we're going to see the biggest changes. Do I think that this is a good thing for the meta? Honestly, I've been one that has leaned towards wanting to see Force Throw banned. It hasn't been something that I'm like, yeah, this needs to happen. Otherwise, it is just an unplayable meta. I was not even near close to that. But it was a card where I was like, yeah, I would be happy if this, like, I think I would have more enjoyment in the game if Force Throw was banned. And that's mainly because it just limited so many different play styles. And it felt like that these decks could go with their game plan and then have just such cheap and amazing ways to maintain control over the board consistently throughout the game because of this really, really cheap removal, just giving you so much resource advantage. And that's kind of one of the biggest name of the games with Star Wars Unlimited is you usually don't run out of cards in hand in a lot of these decks. And really the bottleneck is the ability to deploy those cards in your resources. And so Force Throw allows you to capitalize on that. And it kind of did break the game in essence. I mean, you have things like Open Fire, which are 3 resource, 4 damage. And then Force Throw is something where, you know, oh, I threw away this Crate Dragon that I'm never going to be playing. Or, you know, this Depa Balaba in my Quinlan deck that I'm never going to be playing in this game. And it's not even going to harm me because I don't need that extra card in hand. So it's just a 1 resource deal 7. You know, I mean, that's disgusting. It has been a very powerful card. I'm a little bit sad just because I have a little bit of nostalgia, even though I'm, you know, I think overall happy that Force Throw is banned. I have a little bit of nostalgia for Force Throw because if you guys have played since set 1, Force Throw used to be the underdog. You know, it used to be, yeah, let's load up some Chirrut Red with Tarkin Town and see what we can do with this super early to deploy Force Leader in Chirrut and see if Force Throw can get there. Force Throw was a major contender as to why that deck was even in the game in the first place. And then we got set 3, and that's when Force Throw really started to show its true colors because we got a ton of 5 to deploy Force leaders, or even 6 to deploy like Anakin and Quinlan, that were able to capitalize in the leader spot more so than Chirrut, because Chirrut was never a very good leader. Quinlan and Anakin are far better leaders that can actually maximize on the overall strategy. So I'm curious to hear what you all have to say. I don't think that this is an unpopular ban from my initial impressions and from the initial reactions. So overall, W from FFG, and they are looking, and they're pretty lenient with bans. And I don't think that's a bad thing. I know a lot of people are like, wow, these guys are so ban happy and they just suspend cards every set. Honestly, while it's not great to ban cards, period, in terms of, yes, in a perfect world, it is perfectly balanced and there's no cards that need to be removed from our format. However, that's not where we live. It's you know, there's just a realistic application, which is there are some cases where the playtesters aren't going to be able to find certain combinations or decks, or maybe there's just, you know, evolution of the metagame that they weren't able to test out, just the level amount of players that they have to playtest compared to the entire world. And so the fact that they're willing to make changes pretty rapidly and pretty frequently in response to community and statistical feedback, I think is a good thing. And I think that should be continued. Let me know what you think in the comment section down below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you all for the next one.